Good evening, everyone. It is Tuesday, May 3rd, 2022. Time for episode 49 of The Last Admiral. And we're going to pick up where we left off on page 408 with the chapter entitled The Gladiator. Captain Thurston led the battle line of the 11th Fleet, and neither because he wanted the honor nor by command, but rather due to the fact that he just happened to be there. Captain Thurston is my girlfriend Justine's late father, and after he passed away, when he passed away, I believe I was in the process of writing this book, so I gave him a cameo appearance. So here it is. I'll start again. Captain Thurston led the battle line of the 11th Fleet, and neither because he wanted the honor, nor by command, but rather due to the fact that he just happened to be there. Eatzel's fleet would encircle them before they could escape. That was now clear. They would have to break through, or by some miracle achieve victory against all odds. He preferred the latter possibility. Two massive warships with triple masts moved at the head of the enemy's formation. The northern group was the closest. Their flag was a brilliant family crest in the form of a golden shield with a black cross. A shoulder strap of gold, bordered in red and riveted in black, held the cross from the right shoulder to the left hip of the design. 5 warships, greater in size than any in the 11th Fleet, and 3 smaller vessels of the frigate class comprised the group. The southern armada was the equal of it, but somewhat lagging due to the unfavorable southwestern breeze. "Orion," Captain Thurston directed, "we need more wind." Silver-haired Orion was the most unlikely of Dragonian ship's mages, and for no reason, either more or less than because he was of Lyoselphar descent from an almost extinct race of savage elves who once roamed the northern steppes of the globe. Orphaned on the battlefield, the conquering queen had spared his life by her mercy. He was a talented sorcerer, but ranked no higher than a warlock class. What he was, though, was courageous, and for this reason he had gained the unfailing trust of his captain. His only flaws, really, were in the limits of his power and the reckless nature of a warrior, to whom both life and death were the same. Standing amidships, Orion raised his power. Controlling the winds around the ship, he redirected their energy into the sails to the greatest effect possible. The ship leaped forward, sailing free but really on the wind, and nearly doubling in speed. But such conjured winds were short-lived, and even with his help, they would not break through the blockade. His opponents were sailing on the wind and closing. A giant, flaming ball clove the air above them and splashed into the sea beyond. "All crews," Thurston commanded. "Fire at will." Every archer on board engaged targets on the approaching warship. Artillerists worked their catapults with difficulty in the rolling seas. Ballista teams fared somewhat better, and both vessels struck each other. Sir Drake, Commodore Carradine, observed, this may be our last chance to get you and your crew safely over the side." "You're in a tough scrape," Drake replied. "You are an honorable adversary, but if you can get us into a longboat, we'll take our chances as castaways, just the same." "Sergeant," Carradine said urgently to a nearby marine. "Yes, sir," he replied. "Let's get these men over the starboard rail and into a longboat." "Aye, sir," he responded. "My detail will lower them away." Running across the length of the ship toward the lifeboats, a massive, tree-sized bolt smashed through the gunwales on the port beam. Narrowly missing them, it crushed 3 sailors in its wake. Careening across the main deck, it destroyed the gunwale opposite to it and continued unabated into the sea beyond. Racing past the carnage, they reached the longboats and slid one across the runners and into place beneath the winches. Drake and his crew were soon aboard. The Marines wasted no time in swinging them out over the sea and lowering them into the water. "Farewell, Sir Drake," Carradine said with bold salute, "until we meet again." "Until we meet again, Commodore," Drake replied, while returning a hasty salute of his own. Lowering the oars, he and his sailors freed the longboat from the ship's tackle and then pushed away. Seconds later, ballista bolts struck the Gladiator violently over a dozen times, both above and below the waterline. Fire broke out on their aft decks and the ship listed to port. "Let's get out of here," Sir Drake cried. "Head for shore. If we try and rendezvous with Collingwood's group, they'll probably kill us before we get close enough to hail them." And the next chapter is entitled "The Victory and the Gladiator Engage in Close Action." Their swift successes filled Admiral Nelson's heart with joy. "Conning, steer us alongside of them. Prepare to board." Dragonian archers in the Gladiator's rigging were engaging his crew effectively, and Nelson seemed unconcerned by the near misses of several deadly barbs. A ballista bolt tore Mr. Scott in half right next to him. Another sailor immediately took his place, and she took a bolt through her neck. One ricocheting arrow clipped both buckles off Captain Hardy's boots. "The 11th is full of fire," Nelson announced, "but I suspect not for long." "Sir," Hardy suggested, "we've killed the ship. Perhaps we should move on to another." "Lord Redpool demands our honor and our duty. We will see them all drowned or placed in irons, awaiting trial, before this night is through. It will be quite a spectacle." "Of course, Admiral," Hardy replied. Just then the Victory shuddered as her hull encountered their stricken foes. "Thomas, you may have the honor," Nelson said. In the footnote is the original quote from Admiral Nelson during the Battle of Trafalgar was, "This is too warm work, Hardy, to last long," and the buckle was ripped off by cannonball-driven splinters, not an arrow. Before the Battle of Trafalgar began, Nelson ordered a unique message to be sent to the fleet. "England confides that every man will do his duty." And that was my inspiration for some of the dialogue on this page. Okay. "Run out the planks," Hardy commanded, "for Fermanagh and the King." Both Hardy's Marines and their knights shouted stout war cries and swarmed over the sides en masse. Many died as they left cover, while others fell into the sea between the ships, but some made the initial landing and began their assault. A fierce fight soon erupted along the enemy captain's battle line, a formation which extended amidships from fore to aft. Dragonian archers, opposed by Nelson's own, were perched high up in the rigging and firing down into the invaders, even as the stricken Gladiator was sinking rapidly beneath them. Hardy, unwilling to risk his armored knights unnecessarily, ordered their withdrawal, along with the now useless gangplanks. "Lower the ladders," Hardy commanded, but his knights aboard the Gladiator then battled with enemies determined to die fighting. Taking advantage of the changing angles, the Dragonian archers claimed the lives of many Flemish knights while they still could. A sphere of mystical violet flames surrounded a fierce elfin battle mage standing on the quarterdeck. With magic, he felled 4 sailors with deadly arrows of light and burned a ballistic crew on the first gun deck with his evocations. Raging on, even as the sea began to flow onto the deck of battle around him, he and their brave commander seemed committed to fighting on until the end. "Their captain has my heart," Nelson affirmed. "Thomas, I'm going over the side. You have the—" It was then that a large force began to swarm over their port side, dripping seawater from the long swim. The Dragonian Marines, led by an older man who fought with surprising grace, had slipped over the gunwale silently and killed 7 crew members before their discovery. Admiral Nelson believed him to be their quarry's true captain. A second sailor, with a fierce aspect and salt and pepper hair, fought alongside of him. "Well, Hardy," he observed, "it seems that I won't have to go overboard to meet him, after all." Drawing swords, the 2 commanders entered into the fray beside their crew. Nelson had considered their victory to be a certainty. He had the advantage of numbers and a vastly superior warship, but what he had not counted on was the adaptability of his enemy. Rising to the challenge, he rallied his sailors to his side and used his remaining knights to full effect. Within minutes, their blockade was complete, and individual engagements had erupted. Okay, and the next chapter, on page 414, Commodore Carradine, our David Carradine, and Mr. Shaw engage the Victory's crew. And that's Robert Shaw, of course, of Jaws. Okay. Carradine and 4 squads of Marines made the long, arduous swim beneath the belly of the Viking. Slipping out of the rough seas, they used their special hooks and available ratlines to climb the hull. "It's a fine night for a fight, Jack," Mr. Shaw whispered, as they slipped over the gunwale and drew their swords. "Yes," Carradine replied, "it surely is." Their surprise lasted only a moment before nearby Furman discovered them. Carradine and his coxswain fought well together. Back to back, they lunged and spun, each protecting the other's vulnerable blind side. "Follow me," he commanded. "We must capture the Admiral." Fighting ferociously, the knights of the Victory met them in a pitched battle. Blood and gore splattered the decks and combatants alike, and soon it was difficult to distinguish friend from foe. 2 more warships were fast approaching from the separate quarters to render aid to their admiral. "We're running out of time, sir," Mr. Shaw declared. "We've got company." Carradine simply nodded to him and fought harder. Shaw saw a pair of archers aiming at his comrade from above and behind him. In the next moment, the Commodore would die. Rushing in, he knocked his friend aside, but failed to turn away in time to save himself. One arrow struck him in the shoulder, and the second pierced his heart. Dropping onto one knee, he lowered his swords to the deck just to rest for a minute. "Goodbye, Jack," was the last thing that he said among the living. Carradine struggled back, trying to reach him, but the fight had shifted, and he soon found himself surrounded by new foes. The captain of the Wandering Monk lashed out at his enemies with vengeance in his heart. Running one man through, his dagger severed another warrior's throat. A sword slashed his back, narrowly missing his spine. Wincing and contorting with the sudden shock of the blow, he spun and met his opponent. The knight was confident that his cut was fatal and underestimated Carradine's remaining fortitude. Batting his long sword away, Carradine stabbed him through the eye, and the swordsman died with his mouth opened in surprise. The deck was a horde of chaos around him. Sailors dead and dying piled up, and their cries of agony were a pitiful thing. Carradine waded through the fray calmly, seeking the destruction of every enemy before him, and no longer caring for his own end. So you can see that David Carradine is a huge hero of mine. Okay. Vice Admiral Cuthbert, Collingwood, aboard the Royal Sovereign, attacks from the south. The Royal Sovereign, led by Vice Admiral Cuthbert Collingwood, spearheaded the attack from the south. He was a fit, middle-aged man with a receding hairline, a cleft chin, and contemplative eyes. White hose to the knee, his officer's coat was long, blue, and trimmed in gold. His basket-hilted cutlass hung from his left hip. The second dragon ship in the enemy's line sailed to the aid of their stricken comrade at the van, and Collingwood moved to intercept it. Aided by the fast frigate the Euryalus, they cut the dragon ship to pieces with ballista bolts and great hurled balls of burning naphtha. It sank so suddenly, Collingwood proclaimed, that I can hardly believe my eyes. We must have gutted her. That was astounding, said his captain Edward Rotherham. Rotherham was a pugnacious leader with wavy locks and a hawkish nose. His face was often puckered and prone to the contortions of his worry. His uniform was grand, trimmed in gold, richer still than Collingwood's, and heavy with decorations of military honours. Shall we move in to assist Admiral Nelson, sir? Of course, Edward, he replied. Signal the Euryalus to board them on the starboard quarter. We shall take them on the starboard bow. Conning, turn us 2 degrees to starboard. 2 degrees to starboard, Captain Rotherham echoed. Signal, officer. Instruct Captain Blackwood to move into a blocking position on their starboard quarter. Aye, Captain, he replied. Abaft the port beam, sir, Rotherham reported. The Neptune and the Temeraire have engaged, and beyond them, the Mars and the Proud Bearing as well. The trap is sprung, Collingwood said proudly. The Sea Fox has eluded us for decades. Let us see to it that he does not escape again. Archers, hold your fire until you have clear targets, Captain Rotherham commanded. There are firemen on those decks. When they came alongside of the Victory, the Gladiator had slipped beneath the surface, and skirmishers were dueling waist-deep in the cool waters. Blood from countless bodies adrift around the ships had attracted sharks and caused a feeding frenzy. The water, no longer safe for friend or foe, led to a mass exodus as warriors tried to climb the Jacob's ladders and lifelines in order to escape the sea. And a Jacob's ladder is a ladder made of rope with wooden steps. From Melville, page 673. Okay, we'll read a little bit more. The Last Stand of the Gladiator. You can see, it's easier to see if you read the book, but I try to show you the entire battle from different points of view. One character will see something happen away, and then you're there. And then another character there will see something happen elsewhere, and then you're there. So in that way, I try to give you a wide picture of what's going on, sort of in a simultaneous way, as best I can. Okay. The Last Stand of the Gladiator. Captain Thurston was a champion among them. Battling Firmish knights with reckless abandon, he commanded his crew to board the Victory and fight. Giving no quarter, he asked for none, nor did he receive it. 10 knights died by his rapier, and 10 by his dirk. Remaining in the water after all his sailors had either left it or died, he had waited too long. Sheathing his sword, he placed his dagger between his teeth and turned in order to attempt the climb himself. Suddenly, struck below the waist, a gigantic beast of over 15 feet in length dragged him under. Taking his dirk in his hand, he tried to strike toward the shark's eye, but his arm hit the side of a spar, and his knife was lost. Pounding on the creature's head with his fists, he fought until the end. Sadness filled his heart as he watched the ship die beside him. Down and down they swam into the darkest deep. Farewell, Justine, he thought, for he longed for his beloved, and once freed, he would wait patiently for her to join him in Elysium. Anyway, that was a tough one. I hope you enjoyed it, and next time, episode 50, we'll take up the battle again with Admiral Collingwood. Have a great night.